Just because the people in your life have needs, it doesn't mean that your needs don't matter. Even if those people are children, you've got to figure out within that, how do you carve out some part of you for you? You just, I love the kids. I love the parents. I love all of these things, but you've got to reserve. It's almost like paying a tithe to yourself. You've got to take some part of that.
Welcome to Gap to Gig, the show for dads navigating the in-between season when work, identity, and priorities start asking different questions. Here we talk about what that season looks like and how to move through it with intention. I'm your host, Michael Jacobs, and today's guest is Mylena Sutton. Known as the leadership fanatic, Mylena is a consultant and growth coach who helps people face the conversations they've been avoiding, both at work and at home. Her core belief is simple but not easy. All leadership is personal. The way you show up in one part of your life shows up everywhere, which means the habits, patterns, and conversations you avoid at home don't just stay there. They follow you into your work and everything else. She's also the creator of The Leadership Drives, a podcast where she travels across the country interviewing people about what actually drives them to lead and live the way they do. Mylena pushes people to align everything, not just optimize pieces. And she's known for saying the thing people are already thinking but haven't said out loud yet. Mylena, I'm really excited to chat with you today. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I am looking forward to our conversation. I appreciate the invitation.
Likewise. So one of the things that stood out to me right away is this idea that there isn't a quote unquote work version of you and a home version of you. It's just you.
It's you.
So I kind of want to start there.
Mhm.
Like when you look at dads right now who are trying to show up at work and at home, where do you see things starting to break down?
At first and foremost, there's this idea that, frankly, you are different at home versus being at work. And that's just simply not true. What happens in different environments, you are concerned about different consequences.
Hmm.
So think of it this way: the people at your job, they might like you, but they may not tolerate as much from you as your family members might. And therefore, we take liberties with the people who are in our personal lives. But if, in fact, if we're honest with ourselves, if the consequences were equal in the same environments, our behavior would be. Give you an example. I did just a social media survey with an HR group that I was facilitating a workshop for. And I asked them about their conflict styles at work. And then I asked them to talk about their conflict styles at home. And almost every one of them said at home, they were sometimes perhaps a little bit more confrontational because they didn't necessarily have the same fears. Whereas at work, perhaps you're worried about an ongoing pettiness with the coworker, that kind of thing. At home, you feel safer, you behave differently.
That's so interesting. I never really, when I think about it, I don't put a lot of thought into the environment
Mhm.
that I'm in, right? Or like which group of people I'm with. Is it like family, friends group, or is it a work group, right? I just kind of go by default into whichever environment I'm in and just kind of interact. But when you break it down, it makes so much sense to me of like, okay, yeah, I do behave differently in different environments,
Mhm.
right? And like you said, there's like a comfort
Mhm.
level there, or a difference in comfort level between home and work.
Absolutely.
Whether
And part of what you're doing too, in terms of that different comfort level, when you go into different spaces, your agenda is different as well. Think about it. You want to be regarded differently at work, and you may not care how your Uncle Tony feels about you. It's we
right,
behave in a way where I don't think we realize that we can be subtly manipulative as people, even if we're not conscious of it. When we go in spaces, we're looking for two things: either safety or to get what we want. And that dictates our behavior.
that's a great point. When you say that we can be manipulative, are we also manipulating ourselves?
I think sometimes we are honest with ourselves. We don't do necessarily that personal internal work that we need to do to ask ourselves what's driving our behavior. I also think the word manipulative has a negative connotation to it, when in fact, I think that's just kind of human nature. I
Yeah.
felt, we aim to get what we want. It's almost kind of like what survival is in a way. We
Right.
are doing the thing that we need to do to survive. And I think part of how we manipulate the environment, frankly, is again going back to what do we want from the space? And sometimes we delude ourselves about what our real motivation is.
Right. And sometimes we avoid the conversations altogether, right? Like,
Oh, absolutely.
and you've talked to me a lot about like avoiding conversations or avoiding conversations. Where do those conversations that we avoid start to show up, like at home and work? Like, why do we avoid certain conversations?
I think it's pretty complicated sometimes about why we avoid. Sometimes we are worried about exposing ourselves, and sometimes we are worried about the other person. But oftentimes, what avoidance really is you feeling stuck. It's this idea that no matter what I say, no matter what it is that I do, there is no way for me to win here. Somebody's going to come out with the bruise, whether it's me or the other person. And we don't often give that enough credit in the sense of what it means. Not that I'm avoiding because I'm just a terrible person, I'm lazy, but I actually feel stuck. I'll give you an example, and I'll give you a couple different examples. I have some clients who have challenges at home, but they don't want to come home and give their spouse the impression that they are combative, that they are not agreeable, that they're constantly nitpicking. So, what they choose to do is figure out what their tolerance level is for a particular problem. And the issue is they go all the way to that level and then they explode sometimes. And what we have to figure out is how do we let a little bit of that pressure off? And then how do we also build the confidence and the trust in our relationships so that the people we love, the people who we are attached to, can hold that tension? I can tell you that you have certain habits or certain predilections that really bother me and not hate you. And to make space to hold both of those truths, it requires that we take risks in our relationships.
That's really interesting. That there, the reason for avoidance, it could be many different things, as you said, right? Like, it could be that you're not confident in the situation or afraid of something that's happening. It could be a lot of things. But then avoiding it oftentimes will make it more intense. It'll make it more, not give you the outcome that
Mhm.
you are trying to achieve. How does someone who is avoiding a conversation, how do they kind of overcome that? Is it just building up confidence, or is there something more they should be doing to, or they just have to like just grin and bear it and just, run right through the wall and do it? Like, how do you overcome
You
avoiding conversations?
It's funny, as you were talking, I was thinking about a difficult conversation I had a couple of years ago with my mother. Um, and this is gonna sound horrible, but it's still true. I didn't grow up with my mom. My mom was a teen parent, so I grew up with my grandparents. And our relationship has always had a bit of ebb and flow to it. And several years ago, my grandmother died, and my mother and I have had this constant strain of conflict. And because I know she feels guilty about being a teen parent. I was that person. I'm not going to say anything about the things that drive her nuts or drive me nuts because I don't want to hurt her feelings. She's super emotional. She cries all the time. And in my mind, I felt stuck because I felt like I can't be honest about how I truly feel. But I also don't want to give her a false impression about where I am because I worry that that's going to invite behavior that I don't like even more. So one day we got into it. I can't remember what started it, but I exploded. It was like projectile vomit. I mean, at one point, I was seeing stars. I think everything I thought over the last 10 years just came up and out. And here's the horrible part, but the great part, I meant every single word. The only thing I didn't intend was for it to come out in that setting at that time and perhaps in that way. And that is the thing about avoiding. When the issue is something that you have to deal with, but you avoid it, it builds like that. Now, there are a couple things you want to think about in terms of avoiding. There are some conflicts, some tough conversations I recommend that you avoid. If your relationship is inconsequential to me, I don't see you often, I am not spending that energy on you. I am absolutely not going to do it. But if you are someone who is going to be a regular character in my life, if you are someone who I am not going to see only at funerals and weddings, then I have to deal with issues that come up with you. And the way that you have to deal with it is this. I know this is going to sound horrible, but you've got to think about how you start the conversation, because I think what also gives us reassurance is to know we've done our part. So, one of the things that I tell people often is this: when you have a difficult conversation and you don't know where to get started, start by telling the person you need to talk to just that. We need to have a conversation, and I am doing my best to think well about you so that you can hear my intent, so that you hear my spirit. And it might hurt, but I don't want it to hurt more than it has to. But we do need to talk about this thing. And from there, you use your sense of emotional intelligence. You work on your own sense of self control. You take baby steps through that conversation. You might need to take pauses. Just because the conversation starts today doesn't mean we have to finish it today, but you have to. It's kind of like getting out into. I live in Jersey on the shore. You kind of got to walk out into the water. I mean, at some point, the water's only going to come up to the beach so far.
Right. This is the advice I've needed my whole life, I think, right? It's like I've been there. Like I've let things boil up to the point of like explosion, right? And it's not fair to the person I'm doing it to, even if I felt like they harmed me, but it's also not fair to myself to allow myself to get to that point, to that stage.
Mhm, mhm,
And the idea of how you present it, how you come to the table prepared of like, this is how I'm going to start the conversation. And there's this sense of radical honesty,
mhm,
right? Of like, this may hurt.
mhm,
I need you to hear this,
I need you to
right?
hear it.
And I think as dads, it's easy for us to bottle that up oftentimes of like, we kind of just gloss over things and move on to the next step. Lives are busy. We have
Mhm,
lots of things going on, lots of people coming in and out, right? We have to get kids to activities. We have to, support them in their schoolwork and in just their personal development. And we don't take enough time to think about what are the things that are affecting us? What are the things that we are avoiding that maybe if we took just a couple minutes to think through that, we can address some of those things so they aren't a burden on us, so that we can then show up more for others. And I think what you said is probably the first practical strategy I think I've ever heard for how do you avoid those avoided conversations, or
mhm,
how do you address those avoided conversations rather? Because you make it sound so simple. And it's like, why haven't I been doing that for,
mhm.
all my life?
But I think the reason people avoid it, not only do we not know how to approach them oftentimes, I think again, we just give in to that sense of feeling perpetually stuck. Like there's no way that this is going to work out well. And I think we just have to be willing to trust that we can overcome that. And the other part too is recognizing that you don't have to be perfect in your approach and in your delivery, but you do want to be thoughtful. You want to be careful. You want to convey that you are being as thoughtful as you can be, but you don't have to be perfect in terms of the execution. You don't have to be. And I think with dads and men in particular, when issues come up that involve squishy stuff, the emotions, I think because we live in a culture where we don't invite men to explore that half of themselves in terms of how they feel, it's always the woman is the emotional one and he is logic. If you buy into that kind of trope, then as a man, I think you often feel even more stuck because as women, we get, even though I hate it when people say we're emotional, I like the fact that we are at least allowed to be emotional. Of course, you balance all that good stuff, but with men, you don't have access to that as often. And I think what it turns into is not only avoidance, but it also turns into looking for other ways to soothe yourself. I'll give you an example of that. I have a friend and he has some challenges and he just feels really stuck. He's that person, he works 12-hour days every day when he could go home at 8. He
Mhm.
is using work as a drug, if you will, to give himself some breathing space so that when he gets home, his kids are almost ready to go to bed. So not a lot of time with that. He and his wife, they become ships passing in the night. And I'm like, dude, go home.
Yeah.
Go home. You've got to face that.
Right. Yeah. And it just, you're building up, right? Like
Mhm,
the more you avoid it, the more pressure that builds.
mhm.
And at some point, you can't work 24/7.
No, you can't.
Right? You do have to go home and rest, and it's going to get more and more difficult to rest and recharge and do those things if you've built up this sense of stress at home, or
And
vice versa, right? Like,
they know that something is off too. It's kind of like, okay, so both of us are gonna pretend like the elephant isn't at the table.
right,
So it's not like we're missing it. We're just, again, we're dancing around it.
right, right. There's something you said earlier too that really sticks with me of like you the ones that you don't avoid conflict with are the ones that are perpetually in your life,
Mhm,
right? Are the ones that you are going to see on a regular basis. And you only have so much time in the day,
mhm,
right? And so it's like, how do you best use that time, right? We all have limited number of hours in a day, a limited number of days in the week.
mhm.
Do we spend all our time just going off on people, or do we just, like we got to pick and choose our battles? Like, how do we make the most of our time, right? And it's the ones that we care about most, the ones we spend our time with most. Those are the ones we have to address. And there's some that are just they're not worth your time,
Mhm.
right? And it's you're you see them once every 6 years,
Yep,
yeah, right. I'll just let it go, and I will focus on like, not only do I have a limited amount of time, but I have a limited amount of energy.
yep.
And to address these things requires energy,
Mhm, mm.
right? And so it's like, how do you figure out like where to spend your energy? Well, first thing is which ones are actually going to affect your life. And it's the ones that are there that show up regularly. I think it's so important. I just want to call that out
Mhm.
because it's so easy to be like, okay, well, I've got all these different grievances, right? Or I've got grievances with two or three different people. You really only have so much energy to address
Mhm.
one, I don't know, maybe two at a time, right? But it's like you're not gonna be able to do everything. So which ones are most important to
I
to
I would
addressing first?
I would say this, in terms of addressing your conflict, I kind of have some patterns and things like that. So, like you, look, I have lots of things to do. I'm not addressing every little thing that bothers me. So, first and foremost, some things we've got to also look at is, are these just the petty things of life? You know, or is it something that's going to become a pattern? And that's what I want people to look for. The first time something happens that really drives you nuts or really sits with you the wrong way, consider it. Think about what happened. Memo to the file. I hated this. And maybe you decide to sit on it. If that same thing happens again, particularly in a short interval, that's your key that you need to have a conversation. Because by the time the third incident happens, you're gonna already be halfway up conflict mountain. You're on your way to the summit already because in your mind, this is a pattern now. But for that other person, they may not know just how much it annoys you or whatever that behavior is. So again, the first time you may decide to let it go depending on what it is, but take note.
Yeah.
The second time, we need to have a conversation. The only thing I would say with respect to the second time, I wouldn't have the conversation in the same breath that the situation happened because at that point it's like a flash fire. You're mad, you're ticked off, but when you've gotten to a point where, okay, I'm calm enough so that I am not yelling or have a hostile body language, I need to have a conversation.
That great point of like separating yourself from the situation in order to address it first, right?
Mhm,
I found that useful myself of like in high conflict scenarios that it's very easy to respond with emotion
mhm,
in the moment, right? But when you separate yourself, you're able to calm that emotion and then address it in a more, for me, I guess, productive pattern or proactive pattern of like, okay, this is why it bothered me. This is how I would like to see it go forward. How do we
mhm,
make sure this changes so that we don't keep having this situation
mhm.
occur? Do you think, you talk about patterns. Are the patterns what caused resentment? Is it the repetition that is causing resentment, or is it the actual action that is causing resentment, or is it both?
I think it's a couple of things. I think oftentimes when something really bothers us, we don't necessarily recognize that we ourselves bring certain things to the table. You've got to ask yourself, why does that one particular behavior drive me nuts all the time? I'll give you an example. One of my friends, granted, her parents were educators, but even if it's just girlfriend conversation, you say certain things she feels the need to correct or to explain. And one day I said to her, I am not your student. I'm not your kid. Stop explaining crap to me. And she had no clue how annoying that was. Now, the issue is interesting. She saw it as simply normal. She saw herself, I guess, as a teacher in our friendship. And then for me, I think part of what bothered me and the unspoken thing about that, we come from very different cultural backgrounds. And I saw that as a different type of slight. Who are you talking to? So, with respect to that, you've also got to be willing to look at what's being triggered for you, because sometimes we don't recognize it's not always just the other person. Sometimes they need to be made aware. And then there are other things that, even if it is a cultural difference, or even if it's something with you, are you not worthy of the kind of respect and relationship that you need so that you're not always quieting certain parts of yourself? And that goes back to something you said earlier. You owe it to the people that you are in community and relationship with to say something before you blow up, because while your grievance is often valid, how you handle it is what matters. And with that being said, I often find too, sometimes we go off on people and then we avoid them after the fact because we are ashamed of our behavior.
Yeah.
So, with respect to that, you've got to figure out, hey, I need to talk. I need to manage these patterns that I see. I need to ask myself some questions. And then I need to remember that even if I'm having a moment where I am really upset, that is still a person that I love and I don't intend to cut them off.
Yeah. That's such a great point of we tend to, when we feel slighted or we feel resentment, we feel like, we get these negative thoughts. Maybe it's anger, maybe it's sadness, whatever it may be. And it's so easy to take it out or express it verbally very quickly.
Mhm.
But then how does that make the other party feel? Like, how willing are they then to change? Are they more willing to change because you exploded at them? Are they more willing to change because you took a measured approach with them and you gave them the respect that they felt like, just like you felt slighted when your friend was teaching you
Mhm.
or was quote, quote unquote teaching you or trying to teach you. It's, there's this like level of almost condescension there of like, you know,
Mhm.
I am not beneath you or I'm not less than. So if you want somebody to make a change, if you show them the respect up front, is it easier then for them to make that change? Or are they more willing to make that change than if you exploded them or treat them in a negative light? And I think from my experience, typically when I address something in a more measured approach as to a more emotional approach, I seem to get the buy-in much easier, much quicker.
Mhm.
And now in retrospect, I'm thinking like, okay, that's probably because I am showing the kind of respect that I would like to see back. I'm demonstrating that to them. And whereas if I go at them if I blow up and I, start yelling or just verbally, not treating them well, they're going to be like, well, it's going to put them on the defensive.
Mhm.
Right. Whereas I'm not providing them the opportunity to be like, yeah, you know what? On second thought, you're right. Like maybe I can make a change or maybe I don't agree with you, but I think we can come to some sort of agreement because at least, we're not making it confrontational. We're making it easy for them to stay at the table and have the discussion. Um,
I think part of the issue is when you go off on somebody, particularly if they don't see it coming in terms of timing. You might know the relationship is distressed, but you don't see it coming. Oftentimes, they respond from a place of, I'm trying to get you to stop. That doesn't mean that they really heard you. It
right.
doesn't mean that they're changing their behavior. They're trying to put the fire out. What makes it a useful dialogue is when the person understands where you're coming from. Even if they don't agree with you, you've got to at least understand one another. The essence of respect then becomes a factor. Look, I don't agree with you about A, B, or C, but if I can find a way to accommodate that or to honor it or avoid stepping on that tender spot for you, I will do that. Or at least I'm going to let you know what you can and can't expect from me. That
Right.
is the value of having a conversation when you're at a point where your fight or flight hackles have come down, where you can actually think. Because in that moment, that's when you get the calm down. And that there's nothing more patronizing than that. And that is like putting water on a grease fire. It gets worse.
Yep.
And so with that, that's what you want to think about. It is, how do I make sure that the person can actually hear me?
Such a great point again. I kind of want to take a step back. Like, we've talked about the interpersonal conflicts. I want to kind of talk about some of the internal conflicts, particularly around alignment.
Mhm.
It sounds great to be aligned between work and home and all your responsibilities, but it also, at the same time, can feel abstract.
Okay.
What does it actually mean for a dad or for anyone to kind of align everything in their lives?
My definition of leadership actually is alignment.
Right.
So the way I look at it is like this: you've got to figure out the direction that you want to take your life in, your family in, and all different parts of your life. And once you figure out what that direction is, to align it means essentially to look at which parts of your life are going to help you get there and which parts of your life are undermining your ability to get there. And
Mhm.
from that particular place, you've got some decisions to make. Either you're going to slow down the pace of your journey, you're either going to accept that you might not make it if you have too many of those things, or you're going to have to make some decisions about how to make adjustments, perhaps how to cut some distractions, how to get the people in your life to understand that you're oriented toward this particular direction and you are inviting them to come along. You're inviting your children, your family to come along. And we've got to figure out what are the things that we need to do so that we aren't cutting off our noses to spite our own faces. And that's really the essence of alignment, is really making sure that all of our effort takes us in the direction where we want to go.
And that alignment is both between work and home, right? Like, and it could go kind of in both directions. Of sometimes this is more of a season of work where I need to put more attention into what I'm trying to. I have this big goal at work that I'm trying to accomplish, and that means I might need to, you know, be at work just a little bit longer or have work on my mind a little bit more. But I need to also still take care of my family. But I need to let them know, hey, I've got a little bit more going on right now. This is kind of the adjustment we're going to make temporarily. And at the same time, it could be the other way around of like, I need to spend more time with my family right now. I need to take a step back from work. And if I can afford to do that, how do I do that? How do I still maintain what I need to do running my business or working for whoever I'm working for, but also, get that job done, but also be there for the ones that matter to me most. Maybe there's some big thing that my spouse is working on, or maybe there's something that I want to be there for my kids. Maybe there's a health thing, whatever it may be, of just finding that alignment between what is important in that moment, but also help you get to your long-term goals. So I guess it's really a long-winded way of saying this kind of entails, it's all encompassing, right? It's not just work or home or self. It is all the things put together. Is that a fair assumption in terms of what we're trying to align?
Yes. And it is also the kind of thing that I push back on with respect to saying that there are times in my life where work takes priority. No, work doesn't take priority. If your family is first, your family is always first.
Yep.
What you might find is that you might have to have some conversations, you might have to have some adjustments. But when you start choosing what your North Star is, what your values are, that is what makes them your values. It is nothing compromises these things. You might have to say to your partner, I have a meeting coming up that it's going to take me 2 weeks to get ready for, and this is how it's going to affect our family life. But I'm going to make it up to you. Not just that you have to accept this pivot, but making sure that you always keep it out front. It's kind of like, just take it on a very simplistic level. For me, my family reunion is anathema to my diet. So when I'm there, I'm like, okay, so I can't do all the things that the cousins do. So while they are up at, bottomless brunch, I need to hit the gym. I might hang out with you all. I may have had an extra serving of whatever, but at the end of the day, I am not going to make that trade off. I recognize it's like a bank balance. When you make withdrawals, you've got to make deposits
Right.
and constantly hold that tension and challenge yourself not to allow yourself to make it something that's up and down according to circumstance. Because if it's up and down according to circumstance, is it truly the thing you value?
That's great. Great point. It's hard to think about sometimes, right? Because of like we it's very easy to look at the binary of like work, home.
Mhm.
Got to do both. I prioritize my family. I want to make sure I'm there for them, but I've got to earn a living. But it's more nuanced than that,
It is. And
right?
think about it like this too. Because you're clear that family matters to you most, think about this sense. If you keep that front and center, it should affect how you think about and how you go about work. Because family matters to me. Now, this might be getting into my personal politics. I don't trust most employers to be completely loyal to their employees. I just think that's the nature of the world we live in. And if you value your family most, then you also think about how do you manage your sense of finances with your family, because you don't want to put yourself in a position where everything that you are able to provide to your family comes from your job, or that you spend to the max level of what you can afford. Because if family is really first, then preserving that unit is part of that thought process too. So when
Right.
you're talking about alignment, you're looking at how all of these pieces come together and looking at, again, how do we move in this particular direction in such a way that we respect this value that we set.
Great point. So I know we kind of touched on this in the beginning by saying that you have to think about what is important to you and be realistic with what you can and can't accomplish. But if someone feels like their work and their life are pulling in completely different directions right now, where do they even really begin? Like, what is the actual first steps they take?
You go ahead and scream, cry, and just live with the fact that that's a very uncomfortable place to be in, where you feel like you're being pulled apart.
Yeah.
I think you have to, frankly, just be honest about that is the place where you're in. I would refer to it as the sunken place. You're just in there. But as you recognize that that is the place where you are, where work life, family life, the two are competing, I think you have to ask yourself some critical questions just based on your overall set of circumstances. Is this a temporary situation, or is this something that is going to be enduring? It's like going into an organization where you all have busy season once a year for 6 months, or excuse me, for 60 days, but the rest of the time it's your job is great. That's a different decision than 10 months out of 12 the year is crazy.
Yeah. Right.
And so what you've got to think about is, what am I really dealing with? Is this an acute situation that's going to be over soon? And then I can figure out a way to power through. But if I have a situation where it is what it is, and my job is always going to pull me away from what's important to me, whether it's my family, whether it's a hobby, a business that I want to build, then what I've got to accept is that while I need revenue, I need income, I've got to start to plan for how, in fact, I am going to find other ways to take care of my material needs, because I know long term, if I stay with this job, I'm going to have to choose the job over me.
Yeah. It's interesting because what you say, you make it sound, you make it practical, right? It's easy to follow, but the first step is to, I mean, after you scream and cry and all that, which I appreciate, that's probably the most honest answer, right, we could possibly give. It's like the first thing you really need to do is stop and take a moment to think, right? And to think through these things. But I think as dads, we often rush through that process. We don't allow ourselves the time to actually sit down and think about like what direction I'm going to go. But there are pockets of time that we can find to do that. Even if we have super busy schedules, we're working all day, and then we got to drive our kids to one practice, another kid to a recital, another kid to do this, and you have to get dinner on the table, and you have to do 58 different things. There are times, even if it's a couple minutes here, a couple minutes there, maybe it's in the shower, maybe it's while you're prepping dinner, maybe it's on the car ride home from work. If you don't work from home, there are times to do that. And I think it's helpful for us as dads to remember that, like, yes, we have these responsibilities at work, we have these responsibilities at home. We know roughly what our priorities are. We have to also remember to take time for ourselves to think through, like, what is important to us now,
Mhm.
right? Because we evolve as people too, right? Like, what we wanted in our 20s is probably very different than what we want in our 40s. It's probably very different than what we want in our 60s
Yes.
and everywhere in between. And so we do have to stop and remember to think for ourselves. What is it that we want? What is working? What's not working? And it's easy to avoid things, like avoid that conversation with ourselves too, right? Like,
Yeah.
we talked about avoiding conversations with others, but there's also the conversation with ourselves. Like, what do we really want? What is, like, as you said, our North Star, and how do we stay true to that? And not bend to whatever the circumstances are now. And we have to find ways to make the time for ourselves to think. It doesn't have to be like, I need to block out a full weekend of, alone time, of, I need to go book a hotel room and be by myself and think through this and plan this all out. Right. It doesn't have to be that.
It doesn't
It
have.
could be 5 minutes in the car. Right. It can be just like, okay, I need to start thinking about this and figure out, like, is this working or is this not working? What adjustments do I need to make? Like you said.
Think part of it too is also recognizing that just because the people in your life have needs, it doesn't mean that your needs don't matter. Even if those people are children, you've got to figure out within that, how do you carve out some part of you for you? You just, I love the kids. I love the parents. I love all of these things, but you've got to reserve. It's almost like paying a tithe to yourself. You've got to take some part of that. So, to your point, one of my favorite authors, she said when she decided she wanted to write a particular book, she says she looked at her life and she decided there were only two things that she needed to do. She needed to make sure her kids were okay and she needed to write. She said she cut everything else off her list that she didn't have to do. No more PTA meetings, no more volunteering because this matters to me. She also said before that point, she was working on writing her book when she was driving into New York. She said sometimes the traffic going into the tunnel was forever. So she was like, well, I got 10 minutes. You've got to insist that you have some space for yourself, whether that's getting up in the morning and you have a cup of coffee and you pray before you start your day, whether you take half of your lunch hour and you make it clear to your coworkers, it is never okay to ask me to go for a working lunch. I'm going to go walk every single day, even if that means you just go hide in your car so you just breathe a little bit.
Yeah.
But you've got to find a way to insist on the parts of your life that give you some sense of control over what's happening to you and that give you the opportunity to make sure that you are getting from this life things that make your life whole, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of
You do.
others and what else is important to you, right? So if you don't take care of yourself, you're not gonna be able to show up at work. You're not going to be able to show up for your family, your friends, those that matter to you. And I kind of want to take this to the next level. You've told me about something that I just think is such a great idea, that you've told me before about having some level of financial independence so you're not stuck taking whatever comes your way to work. And you call it, and I love this, a go to hell fund,
Yes.
right? Which is so great because straight to the point, right?
Mhm.
And how does having that kind of optionality change the way someone shows up at work and at home?
I think it's the equivalent of what we say about old people. See, old people have no filter. I'm
Yeah,
not, I'm not suggesting that you're that bad, but you get close. It's
yeah,
even something as a small business owner that I notice with myself. Part of the work that I do with my clients, I kid you not, some of the things that I can say to my clients are things that the people who work there every single day wouldn't dare say. But you know why I can say those things? Because even if this client does not like what I said, I have other clients. All of my resource doesn't come from this one person or
right,
this one organization. And the same thing is true when you have some resources, your own go to hell fund. It's not like you're looking to play it like an Uno card and be out, but ultimately it allows you to not have a situation where what you truly value is always up for sale.
right.
It
That's good.
gives you just that confidence and that ability to say, I know I'm gonna go to my grandpa's funeral. I understand that you're saying you're not authorizing time off. Grandpa, I'm going.
Yeah.
My kid, I really actually do wanna participate in blah, 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 and, most of the time I'm here, but I told you weeks ago this was important. I'm gonna go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I kind of think of it as like an investment portfolio, right? They say diversify your investments.
Mhm,
Don't put everything in one place, right? Like just like you're diversifying the number of customers that you have or clients that you have so
mm.
that you can be more forthright with them and not be afraid that you lose one of them. Having that optionality of having that financial independence allows you to kind of pick and choose the direction that you want to go, right? Or be prepared to make a change at a time that works
It
for
takes
you.
Yes, it takes away that fear that looms like a cloud when you think of, this person is my boss and they control my paycheck. When you have, even if it's just a couple of months worth of cushion, that in and of itself does something for you. That when your margin is so thin, it changes the algebra every single time.
Yeah, great point. So, another question for you, kind of off that topic, is for dads who feel like they're doing everything kind of out of duty right now, like they have to do it. They have to earn a living. They have to go to the baseball game. They have to do whatever it may be. How do they shift toward being more present and engaged without pretending like everything is fine?
That's a good question. That is tough. I What happens often when you're working from a place of duty and obligation, I think it goes back to something you said earlier. Taking the time to ask yourself, why do you feel as if these are the kids you made?
Yeah,
This is the life you signed up for.
right.
Why is it something that suddenly, or maybe it's not suddenly, because sometimes it's not suddenly,
Yep,
but what
for
is
sure.
it about it that makes this so heavy? I think it starts with being willing to be honest with yourself about what it is that is making it difficult to carry that. And once you are in a place where you can be honest about that, it's only until that point where you can start to come up with solutions and strategies that aren't guilt oriented. I think when you deal with people from a place of duty and obligation, sometimes you might even over anticipate what they need or require simply because you aren't able to clearly determine if they need something or if your hesitation to not do everything for them comes from your place of resentment. So, with respect to that, being willing to be honest about where it comes from is the first thing. And then, as you are thinking about where it comes from, thinking about who's in your life that you can trust to share that with, because the other part of it is managing shame.
Yep.
Once you can do those two things, then you can talk about a solution. But as long as you feel like you are a terrible parent or a terrible husband or a terrible, you fill in the blank, as long as you feel that way and you feel as if you have to carry it in silence, you won't get to solutions that are healthy because you feel bad about who you are.
That's such an important point. I think it's something that we, again, avoid talking about, right? His shame of there is some societal expectations. I think, dads, they should be confident and they shouldn't feel the shame. And so it's very difficult for us oftentimes, maybe not for everybody, but it's difficult to address shame and to admit that we have this sense of
Mhm,
shame for maybe not everything works out exactly the way you want to. But again, if we put it in perspective, we take the time to think about it.
mhm,
Everybody has challenges. No life is goes
mhm,
exactly according to plan in all perfection. It's life ebbs and flows, and it's okay when things don't go your way. Like you, for the most part, unless there's some terrible health diagnosis or some other life altering thing occurs, we tend to be able to move on, right?
mhm,
But we just don't talk about shame very much, and it's hard to talk about,
mhm, mhm,
but it's important.
mhm.
And you just outline exactly why we need to think about it and address it. And I don't know what the answer is. Like, I don't know, how do we start talking about shame more freely, and how do we admit that to ourselves, right?
Mhm,
That's hard to do, but it's something we have to start thinking about,
mhm.
right? Amongst the many things that we can, because if we can overcome that feeling of shame, we can realize what we are capable of, I think, right?
I think that goes back again to this idea where men aren't encouraged to even embrace, let alone explore the fact that there is this emotional side to themselves. But looking for, do you have that one friend that you can talk to? Or even if it's not a friend, go anonymously on Reddit. I don't know. But find a way to give a voice to that. There's something so cleansing about saying the quiet part out loud.
Yes.
The thing that haunts you. I was actually in a group the other day, and this lady talked about how she was, frankly, just accepting that she was going to file bankruptcy. She said she was tired of hiding from herself. She was like, you know what? I'm doing the very best I can. I cannot help that I've lost my job. I've been trying to get a job for the last 18 months. I don't know what the problem is, but I am going to stop feeling as if I am a failure simply because I am broke right now.
Yeah.
And you got to find spaces where you can actually own that part of who you are. Because what happens, then you stop worrying about somebody to pull the mask off your face in front of the crowd. It's like, yeah, so think about let's think with the bankruptcy lady for a second, because you do know that's public record. You know what I mean? So guess what? Now that you've owned that, on her next job interview, perhaps she has to do a background check. You already owned it. So now it puts you in a place where if you know that's going to come up, hey, I just want to give you a heads up. When you search, you're going to find this, because waiting on pins and needles, like it's not going to come up, all it's going to do is give you bad anxiety.
Right.
Just own that. And I think what happens with respect to shame, you've got to find pressure release valves. You've got to find them.
Absolutely. And again, it all comes back to being honest with yourself, right? Like we've been talking about this entire time of we got to have radical honesty with ourselves because otherwise we're going to expend our energy
Mhm.
on just trying to maintain, just trying to manage the anxiety or the things that are holding us back instead of trying to move forward and getting closer to that North Star that we've set for ourselves.
Mhm.
So important. So we're going to go from the important and heavy stuff to the not so important real life stuff. And I want to jump into our speed round. 5 quick questions have nothing to do with anything.
Okay.
And the first one, if you're ready, is what's the first kid show theme song that comes to mind?
Pink Panther.
Pink Panther. Love it. Love it. All time classic. What was your very first job?
I worked for the Federal Aviation Administration as an office clerk.
Oh, wow. Very cool. Would you rather spend 24 hours with a toddler sized T Rex or a T Rex sized toddler?
I'm T-Rex sized toddler.
Why is that?
Even though kids scare me, they can't eat me.
That is a very fair answer. Sometimes you just got to go into survival mode, and that is
Survival mode.
What's your go-to karaoke song or the one you would sing if you had to?
I ruined it. I was in Jamaica. I did Rock Steady Baby by Aretha Franklin.
Oh, wow.
That song is hard to sing, but I survived. I survived with shame, but I survived.
You chose a legend, though. You chose a legend. Finally, what's the weirdest thing you've ever carried around in your bag, briefcase, or pockets?
In almost every purse, there is a dry erase marker.
Hmm.
Almost every. I think that's the facilitator in me. I always have a dry erase marker. And depending on where I may have come from before a particular meeting, you can always expect me to have a clicker in my pocket too. I always have those two things, always.
It makes a lot of sense. It's very interesting.
Indeed, indeed.
Well, that was fun, Mylena. Before we wrap up, I want to make sure people know where to find you and how to go deeper into your work. Where should people go if they want to learn more about your work, connect with you, or follow along with what you're building?
Okay. My website is mylenasutton.com. There is a page that I've set aside to give people an opportunity to see the various things that I offer and to kind of check me out a bit. It's mylenasutton.com/invitations. So have a good time on the site. Check out the invitations. Feel free to use the contact page. And if you want to connect on Instagram or LinkedIn, I'm listed under my name. So feel free.
Awesome. We'll put all those links in the show notes. I appreciate that. Mylena, I really appreciate you having this conversation with me. You have a way of saying things clearly that a lot of people feel, but we don't always put into words or don't know how to put into words. There's a lot here that's kind of going to challenge people. if I'm being honest, right? Of what you said, but in a way that actually helps them move forward,
Mhm.
right? And stop holding themselves back. So I appreciate you chatting with me today. Thanks for coming on and sharing this. I really appreciate it. And finally, before you go, if you're a dad listening to this and you find yourself in between navigating a season that feels different, head to gap2gig.com and subscribe to the Gap to Gig newsletter. It comes out every Friday and it's a quieter space to reflect on work, life, and what really matters right now. If this conversation resonated, please consider sending it to another dad who might need to hear it. Until next time, I'm Michael Jacobs. Thanks for showing up and listening to Gap to Gig.